Hey Dan, what's up?
What's going on, Jay?
All right, let's get right into this. Apparently there was a video that the police had originally released that didn't have the entire footage. So maybe you could explain why that would be the case, why they would release initially the body cam and kind of edit out the part that had her mentioning that he had struck her.
Sure. I don't know if it was edited out or if it was just one officer's video. And now it appears that what they released includes either more of the interviews that we saw or just some additional body cam video.
Well, we have the whole thing, so let's roll what we have, and if we run out of time, we could do part two at another point in time. All right?
Here we go.
Okay.
How's it going? How are you? Good. Hey, we got a call about a male hitting a female and the two of them getting in this vehicle and taking off.
Sorry. I don't want to try and defend myself by saying anything here, but I pushed her away. She gets really worked up, and when she does, she swings and she got her cell phone in her hand, so I just trying to get her away. But maybe I'm not one guy to say, okay.
Yeah, we're up to the big medical and let us know if we need to head that way. It's nothing more good.
So Dan, you have like a first impression of the guy, like you come up on a guy. You worked highway patrol for how long?
I was on the road for 4 years before I became a detective for 12 years.
And would you say you get pretty good at kind of immediately getting a sense for somebody, like when you pull them over?
I feel like there's a flow to a traffic stop, so you get good at picking up on cues and indicators as far as human behavior.
And it looks like they had multiple cars here right from the get-go. Why would that be? Why would you necessarily involve more than one vehicle?
Well, they're in a very remote area, and so it's, I would believe, very fortunate that they have a lot of backup here. But we just picked it up during the stop. It sounded like they were already looking for this vehicle because some witnesses had actually called in the behavior. So they're most likely converging on, very limited roadway. So that's why you have so many officers showing up on the scene so quick.
Got it. And did you get an initial impression from him? He seemed very nervous, very anxious at the initial stop. And the report had indicated that when they put their sirens on and came after him, he had actually swerved the vehicle into the curb, and the tires had struck the curb. And so he later claimed that she had grabbed the wheel. But like I said, what's your initial impression of the guy just from that initial interaction?
Sure. There's a few different things that are going on here. It's hard to pick up and classify it as being proper or improper, but he definitely has some, he's fidgety at a point, and obviously a vehicle striking a curb once you pulled up behind him or activated your lights and sirens is certainly concerning, but that's why we have to investigate this.
All right, let's investigate.
Marks on this chin and his right eye.
She in my car?
Yes.
This isn't my car. Oh, she is in here. Yeah.
Jay, if we can stop it there.
Hey, how are you? My name's Eric.
So just one thing from the beginning that struck me was that we do have this response, not only from multiple officers. I believe there's 4 that end up on scene, but we've got 2 different departments. and we've now got multiple interviews that are going on. That, from an investigative standpoint, can be challenging because to be interviewed multiple times, which might not be the best thing. And how are we communicating that information? I know that when I was on patrol or when I was an investigator, we really had to take some quick few seconds there to just figure out who's in control of this and who's going to be primary, and everybody else is in a support role here. What you're going to see is multiple officers talking to both Gabby and Brian, and I believe that can lead to some confusion.
Yeah, I would think it's almost becomes like a telephone game, because then he might walk over to the other officer who's interviewing, the guy, and say, "Hey, what did he say?" And then he's relaying what he said instead of you hearing that for yourself. And like you said, it does seem like it leaves an opportunity, like in the game of telephone, for some confusion and some things to be misrepeated.
It does, but in the same sense, and again, I don't want to Monday morning quarterback these officers. It's probably commonplace, but it's definitely something that we have to do better. I'm sure it's with the best of intentions because people want to help. But the reality is we should slow this down. We should take more time, and we should have somebody that's in control of the investigation and therefore in control of the information.
All right, let's keep rolling.
I'm with Moab Police. What's your name?
Gabby.
Gabby, how old are you?
I'm 22.
What happened? What's going on?
I'm just having a very stressed morning.
Yeah. Is this your husband or boyfriend?
My fiance.
Fiance? Is he a pretty good guy?
Yeah.
What happened over at Moonflower?
Well, I was just really stressed this morning, trying to get a lot of work done, and I was apologizing to him. I had thrown a bunch of stuff in the back, and all our bags are back there. I was just apologizing. I was like, I'm sorry that I get so stressed out because I have OCD and I just like organizing stuff, and sometimes I just have a mean attitude, but I'm not trying to be mean about straightening things up and stuff. So I was just apologizing, but I guess I said it in like a mean tone, and he got really frustrated with me, and he locked me out of the car and told me to go take a breather. But I didn't want to take a breather because I wanted to get going. We're out of water.
So it kind of made you more upset.
Yeah,
It didn't help calm you. It made you more upset.
yeah.
And then what happened?
And, so our goal was to come here and come refill our water.
Are you guys living out of the van right now on travels?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was just really.
So what happened after he locked you out? So you take a breather.
Well, he walked away to go take his own breather, but I wanted to sit in the car because all my stuff was in the car. I had things on my bag, and I was working on something at the moment in the car, and he told me to just relax for a second, and I didn't want to relax, so I got mad. I mean, I don't need to be mad.
Yeah, it happens. Then what happened?
And I told him to dive and get water.
Dan, let me stop right there and come back to you and say, your impression of her, is it, do you get a sense that she's this distressed over the incident, or that there's a lot of embarrassment? And I mean, nowadays you get pulled over, and if this becomes a newsworthy event, you could find yourself on YouTube, and that could cause a lot of anxiety in addition to the actual incident. What's your take on that?
Sure, and I think we have to be very careful to restrain ourselves from looking at this from 2020 because we know what happened and because we suspect who's the person that did it, and say, well, clearly she is distraught and we should have been able to pick up on these things. There's definitely some anxiety there, but as you mentioned, is it anxiety, the fact that she's dealing with a police officer? Because that alone causes anxiety. Is it anxiousness because she actually did something wrong and she's worried about herself getting in trouble? Is it because he did something wrong and she's worried about that? There's just too many things to figure out at this point, but we're definitely picking up on those cues and indicators. Because of that, I think that one of the important things to do, and he's asking some good open-ended questions and he's got a very relaxed manner, but when somebody is anxious at this point, I want to bring them back down to a baseline So we use the term of building rapport a lot. And it's critical in something like this. I probably would have opened up with an introduction to who I am, let her know that she's safe. I would have done the same thing with him. So I'm not taking sides at this point. But I would have actually just talked to them a little bit about their background, about their relationship and how long they've been traveling. Not only to gather that information as an investigator, because I need to know it at some point anyways, but just really to bring that heart rate down. And so that then I can determine that if after all of that, she is still anxious, if she's still nervous, now I have a little better read on it, as opposed to immediately after a traffic stop when I put her in the back seat of my cruiser, expecting to get a true read on where she's coming from.
She keeps saying, or she said a couple times, that she was taking a breather. And that, I thought that was kind of interesting because it's, I've never heard anybody say that in my life. Maybe like a teacher says it to like a child, like in, like time to take a breather or something, but it seems kind of odd. I wonder if that's her language or if that's his language. You know what I mean? It would seem odd that two people would kind of use that term, right?
Absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see if he actually uses the same language as well. But clearly we're trying to figure out if there's some pattern to this behavior. And if so, what is their default? Very quickly, we determined that it's a domestic relationship, right? These two people that are dating each other, that know each other. And because of that, getting a background on this to figure out where we are is pretty important. And part of that is just determining, what does that language mean? What is taking a breather, and why is it the norm in your relationship? Is that something about you, about both of you? What's going on here?
Yeah. And I think, if she, we know that they got back together after this, like they were separated. We know they wound up back together at some point. But in trying to determine like her stress level, I've been pulled over, unfortunately multiple times. And, it does cause anxiety, but I think, for me at least, like I've had, an argument with a girlfriend, in the street, right? And that's the kind of thing that causes way more anxiety. You know what I mean? The idea that everybody's watching, and that now what was private, a private dispute has kind of become public at this point. When the police are involved, it's become public, not just because of the potential ramifications of it winding up somewhere, but just having other people now in your business is also anxiety ridden,
There is I used to write in my reports that somebody was unusually nervous. Not just nervous because, the vast majority of people that I pulled over or that I dealt with as a police officer were nervous. I was looking for behavior that was either unusually nervous, especially after I did my best to try and calm them down, or somebody that was not nervous at all, because that also might be a tell to me. That's probably somebody that has a lot of experience getting pulled over or being in that situation, or is just coming from a different place mentally. So there's a lot for these police officers to figure out during what begins as a fairly simple traffic stop.
One more thing I wanted to add is that in this type of situation, in a domestic where, there has been some physical abuse or contact, between the two parties, I feel like if she was being abused, if he had been abusing her, if it had been way worse than they've made it sound, she kind of has a point where she's got to decide, essentially, is this the end? Is this the end of our trip? Because if she says to the police, yes, he struck me, yes, he's been abusing me, it's almost like there's the additional pressure of her trying to figure out, am I ready to end this relationship right now and have him get arrested, and I'm driving back to Florida by myself and telling his parents that, you know what I mean? There's a lot to like unwrap in what she's about to say. And so I feel like that's additional anxiety that she's dealing with is, do I tell them everything, or am I essentially going to lie to them and tell them only a small piece of what happened because I don't want this to be the end, or this is going to be too humiliating to have to, unwrap everything, tell the family, she's living with his parents. So like if she comes back without him and says, oh, Brian's in jail in Moab, then they're like, what the hell? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of pressure on her, I think, at this point. And I didn't know if police are kind of sensitive to the fact that this is like a life or death decision for her right now.
Well, there's a lot of layers in any domestic situation. The fact that if you have two people dating, just a relationship about, is this going to be a relationship ender is big. Then you put people that live together. That's an increased level, especially if one of them owns the place or is the breadwinner. Then you layer in some kids, or the fact that they also work together or have a business together. And then you throw in this unusual layer, which is there's some of those things, but they're also traveling together. So they've got this road trip that they're on. And you're right. This is a why in the road about not only if the relationship is going to end, but whether this trip that they've planned for so long and they've been live streaming is going to come to an end based off of not only what their answers are, but just where they're deciding the relationship is going to go at this point. There is a lot of stuff going on at this point, which is another reason why we need to slow it down and make sure that at least one person on scene has all the information.
Yeah, is there something on your cheek here? Looks like, did you get hit in the face? Kind of looks like something like hit you in the face. And then over on your arm, shoulder.
So Jay, sorry, we can stop it again there. There's a couple.
Have a new mark.
There's a couple key things that I think we need to point out from an investigative side. And again, you could look back at any one of my investigations or my traffic stops and critique and find the same things that I did wrong, but it's still discussion points for us. He started an open-ended question of what happened at, and he said the location of where the complaint was called in. It's a good open-ended question, but I would have preferred to actually just start even way back before that. So just tell me what's going on. Like, tell me from the time you woke up yesterday morning, right? Because I want to hear more about that as opposed to just very recent. In the same sense, we have to be very careful about asking leading questions.
Yeah.
So when you ask something like, well, did he hit you? Did he hit you in the face? Those are leading questions. We would never do that in a very controlled environment, especially with trained interviewers. We want to stay away from those things. What we simply just want to say is just keep going back to tell me what happened and then what, and then what. And if you wanted to ask about, can you tell me about the mark on your face or the scrape on your arm, you still do it in an open-ended way.
Yeah. And, one thing, that you learn in law school when it comes to, trial advocacy or whatever is you learn the difference between direct examination and cross-examination. So direct examination is something you do on your witness where you ask them to, tell you what happened, and you want them to have as much time as they need to tell you the story. And then on cross-examination, you do on an adverse witness. So you'll do it on, if you're a DA, you're going to cross-examine a defense witness. And your goal there is to lead them to where you want them to go. So it's really, it's a good point because, he says, oh, so can you tell me what happened? Did somebody hit you in your arm? It's like he's gone from asking the direct question to then asking the leading question instead of giving her a chance to answer. And one thing I tell people is a lot of times the best way to get answers is to ask a question and then shut up and let somebody talk.
Absolutely. Which we very much have to be listeners in this. And again, we need to slow it down, and we need to make sure that we have at least one person is doing both of these critical interviews so that our communication doesn't cause any bad decisions here.
All right, let's get back to it.
Can I see the other side of your face? So, what happened here and here?
I'm not sure it was I was just trying to get in the back of the car and his backpack was on the back and got me.
So the backpack got you? So there's two people that came to us and told us that they saw him hit you. There's two people saying that they saw him punch you. We're just independent witnesses by Moonflower.
Well, to be honest, I definitely hit him first.
Where'd you hit him?
I slapped him.
You slapped him first? And then just on his face?
You get to shut up.
How many times did you slap him?
A couple.
And then what? And then his reaction was to do what?
I my arm until I really happened.
He just grabbed you.
Yeah.
Did he hit you though? I mean, it's okay if you're saying you hit him, and then I understand if he hit you, but we want to know the truth if he actually hit you.
I
'Cause, you know-
I guess, yeah, but I hit him first.
Where did he hit you? Don't worry, just be
He
honest.
like grabbed my face, like, I guess. He didn't like hit me in the face, like he didn't like punch me in the face or anything.
Did he slap your face or what?
Well, like he like grabbed me like with his nail, and I guess that's why it looks. And then like I was cut right here, so I could feel it.
Yeah.
When it burns. But
Okay. So has he been drinking?
no, we don't drink.
Okay. What was up with his driving? This officer said he hit a curb
I
while you were driving.
well, he was driving.
While he was driving, you were hitting him.
Well, not a lot, but yeah.
Well, that was distracting him while he's driving. Are you?
No,
Tra-
only for like a second. No, because I saw the lights come on, and I like kind of.
Did you already tell him all this?
I didn't get that far into
Okay,
it. She was hyperventilating.
She
a
said
little
that
bit.
they don't drink, but at the point where you let them out.
You don't drink or anything. I was
She started hitting you.
yelling at him, and then when he turned like that, I like got a bunch of like.
So Jay, let's stop with
She said
that.
it was like hitting
Yep.
her. You said it was Gabby? I'm sorry, I don't know that. It was Gabby?
Yeah.
You okay, Gabby?
But I apologize to keep coming back for the same thing. But again, even the statement of, we didn't get that far. She was hyperventilating. It again tells us, one, why we want to limit the interviews to whoever's in control of that investigation so that we don't ask them to go over and over again unless we want them to.
Right.
I'm going to ask them to tell the story from the beginning to the end. I'll probably start with, tell me from the time you woke up this morning to how we got here. And I would say, I want you to tell me it in 15-second increments, as in everything you did from brushing your teeth to driving to the restaurant to striking the curb. Like I want it in as as detailed as possible. One, that's going to help calm her down. It's also going to allow her to throw up flags about if that anxiety comes back, where we're starting to get close to something or where something might have happened.
Right.
But I also want to make sure that I'm in control of that information so that, one, we don't make her go through it multiple times without a true purpose to it, but it also gives the ability to calm her down. So we need to back it up more and to actually get into more detail.
And the one thing that I note is the other officer indicated that she was initially hysterical, and now this guy's been talking to her for, I think we're about 5 minutes in. So the fact that she's kind of still this worked up tells me that, and from my opinion, I feel like the stakes are very high, that she's very, very concerned, not just about, she's concerned a lot about the ramifications of what's going to happen with the police. That this is ongoing. So she's separate from him. She's not in danger at this moment. She could have him arrested. And that she's in great distress trying to figure out what to do here. And I think you can see some of the indecision on her face when they ask her the questions.
True. And again, trying not to use the hindsight of, she also could be concerned about getting arrested herself.
Yeah.
So, she's telling us that she's a person that probably wears her anxiety on her sleeve and that it is not easily diminished, right? Whereas he might have some emotional reaction, but he was actually, even though he was fidgety, he was in a much calmer place as far as not being so emotional. We still picked up on some cues and indicators, but she clearly is wearing her feelings for a lot longer. And so we have to look more into that.
I will say this, she's not really defending herself. She is accepting a portion of the blame that I feel like somebody that wants somebody else to be arrested would not do. If I get into a fight at a bar and somebody punches me in the face and the cops say, "What happened?" I'm going to say, "He punched me in the face." I'm not going to be like, "Yeah, I was bothering him. I bumped into him. I knocked his drink." You know what I mean? I'm going to try to paint him as much of the villain as possible if my goal is to have this person get in trouble. So the fact that she kind of is taking responsibility, or maybe we don't know if it's even true, but the fact that she's saying these things that, oh, I hit him first, I'm the one who made him hit the curb, tells me that she is already thinking that I don't want this to end with him going to jail.
No, I think that's a good pickup, but I also would say that we're going to get the same thing from him.
Okay.
He's not immediately trying to put this on her. A matter of fact, when he apologized for hitting the bump, he doesn't say, sorry for hitting the bump, she grabbed my arm or she was punching me. So I think they're both either intentionally not telling us everything, or they just don't know how deep we want to get into the actual facts. But I don't think either of them at this point are showing that they want to throw the other person under the bus.
Yeah.
Or that they feel real fault totally on the other person. Like, I think they both feel some fault in what happened here.
And we'll break down his the body cam interview with him separately. But let's get back to this.
Sure.
I mean, do you have medication for anxiety you take? Or anything? Do you take any medication for any?
Just do yoga.
Try to meditate stuff, but you tend to have a lot of anxiety and stress.
I have a lot of anxiety.
And what's his name? Is it Brian? Is he usually pretty patient with you?
Yeah, but it just makes me upset. I know that he definitely gets frustrated with me a lot because I have a lot of anxiety and he definitely has anxiety too.
Well, that could be a bad combo if you both have anxiety. I have anxiety too, and my girlfriend, my girlfriend's really, really calm, and she has a way of taking my anxiety and bringing it down. But my ex-wife, that's why she's my ex-wife. I'm just sharing. I know it's a little personal, but to help you understand, we would feed off each other's anxiety and it would spiral. You know what I mean? And it doesn't matter how much I loved her. It may be bad for your soul. Just saying. I'm not telling you what to do with your life, but if you know you have anxiety, look at the situations you can get in. You know what I mean? And we're not here to be mean to you or anything. Well, there's a first time, and then it usually. We'll go see what Brian's saying, but I think you've heard everything now from.
Quick question. You said you were hitting him in the arm. Did you grab his arm?
You want to come stand in the shade? Speaking of the call, man. Yeah, I know the struggle.
So I want to address one thing that she said. She was talking about her anxiety, and then she said he has really bad anxiety too. So again, to me, trying to kind of share blame a little bit, and then what the police officer did, maybe you could talk about that, because as a person, that's who I am. I try to connect with people, and the way I connect with people is by telling them something about my life, to get somebody to tell me something. And that's what he did, but I didn't know what your thoughts were about, in general, kind of telling stories to kind of connect or to get somebody to reveal something.
You're right. I think that's a good move to be able to relate to people, especially when you're standing there in uniform, right? So there's already a wall between you and who you're talking to. So being able to relate to them, and I think that's a good move on his part. One critique I might have is that when he starts talking about the fact that with his ex-wife, and that's why they're not together, that he's maybe already giving some advice that maybe her and Brian shouldn't be together. And I think this is way too early, nor maybe is it our responsibility at all. But but definitely at this point, it's way too early. And if you're trying to calm her down, insinuating that maybe their relationship should be over is probably not the best way to do that. I mean, again, we look at this afterwards and know that it led to a horrific event, but we could also pull up numerous other domestic events like this to people that are happily together today. So you're right. I would find a way to relate to her and say, hey, this is common. It happens in my family. Here's some of the things we do. That's awesome. Insinuating that maybe you shouldn't be together with somebody is not the place for it at this point.
I agree. That's not something maybe to offer up, but I think his interpretation of what's happened and future events, and like I said, even without 2020 hindsight, I tell people, and I've had friends of mine that, I've gotten into physical altercations with, whoever. I mean, if it's whether it's with somebody or whether it's a partner, I say that typically it looks like this. Like the first time that somebody gets physical, and then they stay together, I feel like if this is truly the first time that's ever happened, I do agree with the officer's assessment that it's only going to get worse. And like I said, I would say that I've had, people come to me as an attorney and say, hey, I'm in a situation where somebody struck me or whatever. And I will always say to them, hey, it's not going to get better. Like if this has happened, it's not like, they're not even married. It's not like you guys go to couples therapy and you have kids and you've got all this at stake. These are two people that could literally just go their own separate ways and be done with each other.
Correct. But by the time they get in your attorney's office, in your office, we're much farther along than we are here. Like police deal with this on a regular basis, and the vast majority of these couples go on and, have, relationships that last a lot longer. So if we didn't know the outcome of this, I don't know if at this point we actually have any full picture of what exactly happened. Looking at this here, I still am not comfortable about who initiated contact, who struck who, whether the witnesses actually saw, physical aggression from one or the other, or how that unfolded. To me, I'm still doing my investigation. So I'm certainly not going to go into any advice role or anything like that. I'm still trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah. And again, it's the difference between, for me as an attorney, I'm an advocate. So if somebody comes to me and tells me a situation they're in and I think they should get out of it, or I think they're at risk of, being harmed, then I'm going to give them advice and I'm going to tell them, you need to stay away from this guy. But like you said, at this situation, the police officer hasn't ascertained exactly who's at fault. And his job is not to advocate until he knows who's at fault, right?
Correct.
One more thing, when they said to Brian, do you want to stand in the shade? That was kind of an inappropriate laugh. Did you catch that?
He's definitely showing some quirkiness, but
like there was nothing funny about saying, do you want to stand in the shade? And he laughed like he heard, one of the top 10 jokes he's ever heard.
Yeah. Well, here's another reason why we need to talk to people and create some baseline, because we don't know if he's just quirky. We don't know where nervousness or fidgeting is coming from. And so when one of the first steps is to actually calm people down, then we can mostly rule out any low-level anxiety. Then when we've talked to them about how long they've been on their trip and how they ended up meeting and where exactly he was from, or I relate to the fact that he's got a fish bumper sticker and what type of music he listens to, if that's actually a responsibility of those other cops rather than getting into primary interviews. They could be doing supportive investigative behavior by actually just calming him down and getting a baseline. Then when we go and we ask him something and we see some cues and indicators that we pick up on that are unusual to his regular baseline, we should question that and ask, what is that trying to tell us? But we haven't put that work in yet. And listen, in defense of these officers, roadside stops are some of the hardest investigations to do. I came from a world in major crime where for 12 years we had the comfort of doing very slow, detailed investigations. But during the time that I spent on the road, you feel like you're rushed. You feel like traffic stops should move quickly at a pace. And unfortunately, we now know that this was much more than a traffic stop, and it's something that had a lot more importance than, just a minor battery or assault here, unfortunately.
Well, you also get in the habit. I mean, like you said, when you're on the road, you're making multiple stops a day, and you kind of can't treat every stop as a future murder investigation, or you know what I'm saying, or a future missing persons investigation. You have to take it for what it is, and you don't want to, make something bigger than it is, because of this. Most traffic stops are rather incidental, are they not?
They are, which is if you think about the fact they were called for an incident that was witnessed at the restaurant. if they just happened to get there at the restaurant while that incident was still going on, that alone might give us a different feel. The fact that we're on scene, whether it's at their residence
Right.
or at this restaurant, as opposed to we pulled them over during a traffic stop. It's different dynamics, but it is important for us to make a shift and say, we need to slow this down.
You know, you made a good point. We're also on the road. So this van is their home. It's not like they're in Florida, and if he gets locked up, his family's going to come to the jail and he'll be out in a couple hours. I mean, the potential stakes for the two of them, of one of them going to jail or both of them going to jail, are pretty huge. And like I said, I feel like, you know, that was a, you know, I don't know him and I haven't, you know, watched anything extensive with him, but to me, that was just a very nervous laugh. And he seems to be kind of, if you compare just this still that we're on, and we didn't freeze frame it on this for any reason, but if you kind of compare this to her, it's a huge, you know, divergence in the two of them, and, you know, what they're publicly portraying to us. That's all. We don't know what they're actually thinking inside.
It is. And, you know, already if that officer is already picking up things where he's giving some advice that maybe this relationship isn't going to be lasting, well, that kind of goes against an eventual decision that we're going to say, which is, you know, I think there's no crime here. And by the way, you can kind of sign each other out and be off and on your way together. Right. So we're going to see that we're going to kind of give two mixed signals of thinking that this is worse than it is, but we might end up leaving in a situation where we demonstrate that maybe we didn't think it was that bad. And so it's tough. There's a lot that's going on.
Well, we know they wound up separating for the night, and that was at the police recommendation, but we'll get into that when we get there, because I do want to talk about that as a procedure, because I've never really heard that before. So let's let it roll.
Well, one more thing is the fact that they are going to go back into this very close quartered van together. You know, when we know that we have two people that live together, that alone is very concerning to us, because they're going to be under the same roof.
Right.
This mobile roof that they're under is close contact. Like, you can't decide, I'm going to sleep on the couch tonight.
Right.
So that is even more concerning from a domestic standpoint of, man, if we don't make sure that things are somewhat on solid ground here, they're going to go back into an environment, even after having a day apart, where they're going to be in close contact. And that's concerning.
Good point.
So you don't drink or anything?
No.
Okay. So you were talking to these officers, I don't mean to butt in, I just felt kind of bad for you. Maybe you stand here to have more shit. Right?
Weird, ducking down, but
No, I know how it is.
a big sombrero.
Well, from when I first got here, we were more worried about what kind of a guy you are from what we heard. When I'm talking to your girlfriend, it sounds to me like maybe this is not so clear cut. So, did you already give a statement to this officer?
This gentleman here.
Yeah. And this gentleman noticed that you had some marks on your neck. Yeah. Yeah, she's got some marks on her too. We're just trying to figure out what all happened. And I know you probably already told your story. This officer's probably going to be the one handling the whole case. You want to listen to what he has to say, and then you tell him what happened. Yeah? If you don't mind.
Sorry.
See if it sounds okay.
My guard is out here. So like the bodies here, like intense.
Thank you. Oh no, apparently they don't even drink. She says that he hit the curb because when Officer
So Jay, if we could stop it there, because I think what we lose now is the interview with Brian, because this is the different body cam video. So that what we have is we have a senior officer, apparently a senior officer and a junior officer. So the investigation belongs to the junior officer, but the senior officer is definitely given some investigative advice and kind of jump starting some of these things. So that's where we kind of see this give and take and multiple interviews back and forth here.
Right. Are they Are they getting back to Brian right here? Let me skip ahead and see if we when we get back to Brian, because it looks like we're going to stay with the officer for a while here. All right, let's fast forward up to Brian again, okay?
Sure.
Did you ask me to take a picture of them? Yeah. Brian, unfortunately, in the city of Utah,
Throw it back on the screen, Jay.
we don't have discretion in some things. Like, for example, if I pull you over speeding and I want to give you a warning, I can do that if it's under a Class A, it's Class B or under. If I want to give you a warning for all kinds of stuff, I can. But there's a few things I can't. I'm not saying I, at least, I'm not trying to. One of the things that the state legislature doesn't give us discretion on is charges when it comes to domestic assault. And it sounds like you guys are living together, so you meet the statute for domestic partners, and you do have injury, and both an independent witness, probably the next one we're going to talk to as well, which we haven't talked to, but one we did talk to, and your own companion have made it clear that she was the primary aggressor, and that she was striking you and that you received injuries. You haven't admitted to striking her. She has not admitted to you striking her. The witness did not see you strike her. So at this point, you're the victim of a domestic assault. That even if you didn't want to pursue this, we don't have a choice. The best thing we could do to not, the law says we have to charge her. It doesn't say we have to put her in jail. Okay, but it also says we have to separate, do a no contact order, and then we have to put her in jail if we cannot separate. And there's a little problem here. Is you guys live out of Florida, live in the van together. How are we supposed to separate you guys? Now, I don't want to take this small 20, what is she?
Yes, 22-year-old
female in jail. And you can definitely defend yourself against, but at the same time, we can't say because you're a male and she's a female, we can't treat this different than if you were the male hitting her. We got to treat it the same.
Yeah.
So she's kind of in a tough spot. So let's have an idea about how she can not go to jail and be separated. Do you have friends in town? Somewhere she can stay? Tomorrow, if you want to, it's up to you. You can go to jail. You can't because we don't have charges for you. Now, tomorrow, if you wanted to, you can get with her again tomorrow. If you wanted to be with her again tomorrow, because it's after 5, so office closed, you can go to the police department, fill out a waiver, you drop the no contact order so you guys can still be together. But she's going to have a court date online in a week or two. She's going to have to show up for a court date online and answer. The prosecutor might drop it. She might say, for example, if you're not willing to pursue it, that's your decision.
Yeah, but anyway, I was going to say, definitely is, I'm not going to say anything. So I can't say earlier, it's a little sloppy. I'm sorry that I get it so public. So I just want to get like the checklist thing, try to do
if you want her back, well, she'll get a paper with the court date. Well, the court date has to be attended in order for them to decide whether they need to continue or adopt it. The first is just an initial appearance to say, are you who we think you are? Yes. Do you understand the charges involved against you? Yes or no? Yes or no, the answer. Do you have an attorney? Yes or no? Do you need one? And then from there, she can ask to speak with the prosecutor. The prosecutor might be contacting you and say, hey man, I know she's 110 pounds soaking wet, you're a big strong guy. We understand you're not even wanting to pursue this, but the cops have to follow the statute. How, like, what we're in the interest of you, if justice for you, the victim, what do you think? And they can decide to pursue the prosecutor. Or they can decide to drop it. Or they can decide to give her a plea and make it kind of go away. She gets from now on. But that still does not eliminate the first court appearance that she has to attend, which thankfully for you guys is going to be online. So if you're out of town, so here's the thing, if you're out of town and she doesn't come to a court appearance online, they can suspend driver's license, they can issue a warrant for her. So she needs to play ball. And,
yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah. And remember, me and her team, I'm sorry about all this, I apologize again, but so she's got her online court date, just acknowledges her, and then she's got one for the.
Well, there's automatically right now, there's something called a no contact order in place.
Yeah,
From this point forward until tomorrow, if you wish to drop it, you have to go to the 217 East Center Street, Moab Police Department, and you have to ask them to give it to you. You want to fill out a waiver that you're requesting a waiving of the contact order, the no contact order. The no contact order means she cannot come into contact with you, she cannot talk to you, she cannot text you, she cannot go on any premises you're occupying, she cannot go to your vehicle. And until you drop that, or until a court date If you don't drop it, it stays in effect until midnight on day 4. And then that gives you time to get a protective order, a long-term one, if you feel like you need one. It sounds like you don't even want this one. So tomorrow, they open at 8. You can go to the police department, you can fill out the waiver, they can remove it, then you can say, hey, babe, where you at? Let me pick you up. You can pick her up. Now, we're hoping not to put her in jail, but if she doesn't have somewhere to go tonight to be separate from you, then where are we supposed
I
to
can't
go?
talk to her now because it's
There's
separation.
no contact order.
So tell me this. Do you guys have enough money for like a hotel room or anything like that? What we could do is we can cite her for this and then we give her a ride over to whatever hotel you guys
You
decide.
can pick her up there tomorrow if you want to know what.
On your way, we'll pick her up, stop over there at PD, sign the paperwork that they're requesting, and then you can go pick her up quite literally.
Unless you know someone else in town that's a friend that you can stay with.
You know, unfortunately not. I don't. I guess that.
Yeah, I sure hate to. I don't want her to go to jail.
So if she goes to jail, it's like if that goes down somewhere instead of her going to the hotel, right? If it's citation, it would be.
It kind of depends. So if she goes to jail, you're gonna book her. They'll take her fingerprints. It's
Yeah.
gonna go on her criminal history, and then if they don't convict her, then it'll just show that it was dismissed. It'll show on her criminal history that the charge was dismissed. If she is found guilty, it'll show up that she was guilty of domestic assault. But the charge itself will show up on her criminal history until she gets it expunged. Now, even if we give her a ticket, we're still gonna take a fingerprint, and it's still gonna show up. Either way, it's still gonna show up. There's no way around the Class A. Or is this Class B?
This is Class B.
But they do require a fingerprint on it.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
The other part is if you contact her, you can contact her, you can charge for the Class A.
so
It's a little bit different, but it doesn't.
if you were to contact her and she responds to you, then she can get a new charge by contact order. No contact order doesn't restrict you, it restricts her. So if you go talk to her and we find out you're not in trouble, she'll be in trouble. So it's in your interest to. Does that make sense?
No, I'm getting it.
It's a lot, I'm really quick.
No, I'm getting it. I'm just trying to figure out like.
You don't know anyone in town? You guys been here how long?
No.
Officer Dan, that seems like way too long to tell him what his options are, and seems like the officer is kind of dealing with a lot of his own decision about what to do here.
Correct. And I feel at this point, he seems to have made the decision that he's going to arrest her. Now he's deciding again between this ticket or in custody or not, but it's really in direct contradiction to the conversation that he had with her, which was a lot about maybe this relationship is not healthy and shouldn't be together. But here the conversation is actually about, hey, how do we minimize the impact of this on your relationship and your life? Like, you can sign out a waiver after 24 hours. You can, if they ask questions, I could see going down this road, but this is, I think, for an unknown situation, right? You're asking a lot of an officer to come in and within, 45 minutes of conversation, determine on whether these people should be together or not be together. And yet one conversation is about ending a relationship. This conversation is really doing everything you can to work the system to keep them together. And I just don't know if we need to go either of those places. We gather the facts and circumstances. We decide if there's probable cause to make an arrest. We figure out if we have a duty to make that arrest, especially in domestic violence situations where they're volatile. And there's a reason why there's the 24-hour or even the week-long wait for the court date. I just realized how blessed I am to have worked in Connecticut, because our domestic violence cases go to court the very next day. So they're before a judge the next court day, which in this case, I believe is a Thursday. So she would have been before a judge. We wouldn't have been waiting a week where they could then have this future contact. And I think that that's critical to letting everything simmer, to gather more information, not only from backgrounds of records and their history and contact another state, but also to really go interview those witnesses or see if there's video or find out, do more of an investigation. But we've kind of gone from maybe you shouldn't be together with her to, hey, this is how we minimize this. And I wonder if that is a little biased towards the fact that when we were talking with the female, we treated a lot more like a victim and we're treating him like not so much a victim, as opposed to we're not telling him to get away from her, right?
Right.
We're not telling him that the relationship maybe isn't healthy. Even
Well,
when we said we're probably going to arrest her.
you heard what he said. He said, you know, even if she was hitting you, like you look like you could defend yourself. So you caught that, right?
It is, and it's a bad place to be,
Yeah.
you know, because this isn't about who would win in a
Right.
physical fight. And I know the end result. Let me be extremely clear. He is the scum of the earth. He hasn't been charged with murder yet. He has not been convicted of it. But he left her there in one manner or the other and did not do one thing to care for her safety. He is the scum of the earth, regardless of what level of involvement he had in it. However, at this point in this investigation, if I'm that officer on the side of the street, I don't see that. I see him being concerned for her. I see him being willing to diminish the crime and not throw her under the bus. So
it's so easy to Monday morning quarterback the situation for people to look at this. We're trying to look at the situation for what it is. Like, we're on the scene. We're like little,
absolutely.
you know, virtual people here describing what we're seeing. You know, it's not fair to the officers to take into account what we know now and attribute that knowledge to them at that time.
It's true. And we still don't know exactly what happened. We know the end result, unfortunately.
Right.
But we don't know if a fight, we don't know why everything happened. So we should not look at this and think that we could pick up on cues and indicators that aren't there. And we certainly shouldn't have been at this point in the conversation about giving guidance. We should just let the law work as it works. We have a duty to investigate and to arrest if there is a crime in these situations. And we're clearly at the point where we have that.
Well, in all fairness, we did fast forward 10 minutes. So during those 10 minutes, it's probably the officers were speaking to each other and were sharing information like we talked about, that it
Correct.
may not have been, you know, 100% what the person, you know, what these witnesses told the police officers. But that's what, you know, that's what we skipped over to kind of get to Brian. But this guy, like you said, his change of attitude from treating her like the victim and then, you know, coming over to this guy and being like, hey, let's figure out how we can work together and make this go away. I'm going to tell you everything you need to do to make that happen. It might be based on some additional information, like I said, that, you know, if the consensus of the officers on the scene was, you know, she's there saying, I have bad anxiety, I've got OCD, and between what he said off camera to the other officers that would be on their body cams when they were speaking to her, there could have been some sharing of information that, hey, she seems very unstable, because that seemed to be the takeaway from this.
I think the logistics are coming to play as far as the challenges of them being on a road trip together. If we are at an apartment complex in this jurisdiction and they have family where they can each go separate to and they work different jobs, we're probably going to handle this different. We understand that to separate them for 24 hours is going to be a challenge, which is why we have to find a hotel and figure out how to sign this waiver. I think if we are talking about residents of the jurisdiction, we're probably not be in such a rush to go sign a waiver so that you can have contact again after 24 hours. Because why not just figure it out next week? Why not just take a longer pause? But the fact that we're traveling together in a van, it makes it a dilemma for everybody involved, for her, for him. And, you know, with the best of intention of the officers, they also are trying to take this into account. And unfortunately, we probably learned why we can't.
The officers also don't seem to be aware that this is her van at this time. So they're suggesting that she go to a hotel for the night while he take her vehicle. I mean, that's how I'm interpreting this, that they're not aware that this is her vehicle, and it wouldn't really make sense for him to say to him, hey, you take her vehicle for the night, she'll stay in a hotel.
Correct. That seems right. And again, that's just one of the it's a question we should ask at this point, you know.
So,
Who owns the
because we know what they ended up doing was kind of flip-flopping what they're suggesting here, which is that, hey, she'll go to a hotel, you stay in the van, and then we know it wound up being the other way.
Absolutely. And because we know what happens with that, we also know that he basically volunteers to sleep out in that park and then walk several miles to where he's got to sign this waiver. So for all the people that want to, at this point, crucify him and say, you know, look at everything that's going on. You have somebody he wants her to take the vehicle to go to a hotel room. He's willing to sleep out in the woods at this point.
And he offered to go to jail himself. If you heard that little aside,
Correct.
the officer said, we have no reason to arrest you. And he said, I could take your radio. And,
Correct.
you know, right. Like, hey, I could do something to get myself thrown in jail for the night. But again, we don't know if he legitimately is trying to keep her out of jail or if he's trying to portray himself as a good guy.
Yeah, tough to determine at this point, but he's certainly doing some things that are, you know, are positive signs towards him if we didn't know the fact that he ends up being the scum of the earth.
All right. Dan, we are at the 56-minute mark, and I promised that we would go for about an hour. So let's do just a couple more minutes and see if we have anything else to add. And then we can do part 2 at a later point. How does that sound?
Yeah. And I think there's going to be a lot of parts to this. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I just meant part 2 of this particular video.
Is it?
She can. I don't think CK will take her if she's the aggressor.
No,
It is a women's shelter.
I'm curious.
You can find out. Hey, she doesn't have where to go.
If you did the citation, she, like, say she drove off she could drive off in this car.
We could give you a ride somewhere.
I got my backpack.
Sucks for you.
I
But you
got my
can,
backpack.
you can stay that.
You want to drive me to Delicate Art?
Does she have a good driver's license? And
She's already a citizen, but she's good.
you
Yeah.
trust her with your vehicle? And
Yeah, she can handle it.
well, then you'd kind of be homeless for the night. around
And I
town.
mean, I can't talk to her at all.
Well,
And I've got to do the thing, so I can't go camping.
we can tell her what it is that she needs to do to get through all this, and then let her know what your plan is.
Here's the problem, though. We take you up to Delicate Arch. You're going to be flipping it from Delicate Arch all the way down to Moab Center Street. So you can fill out that paperwork, because if you're not there by noon tomorrow, you're
It's
going
always
to be
a
looking at Monday
tomorrow
morning.
because it's early out Fridays over the office.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be around.
You'd be looking at Monday morning before you can actually see her again.
Again, we're not trying to make your life hard, but this is written in statute. There's nothing we can do about it. It's designed to protect victims of domestic assault. Not everybody's the same. This is different than normal, but we have to treat everything the same. And that's just how it is.
So you just think you can't afford a hotel?
No?
Very little money we have for sure.
Hotels are expensive here now.
You want me to, I'll call CK then.
Just see if CK will take her for the night.
I'll see if they'll take you.
Is
Then we can figure it out.
This is a women's shelter.
Oh,
Yeah, actually, CK will take you as a victim of domestic assault. CK will take you, and they will help you tomorrow.
And you're like a block and a half away from the PD.
Let's see if CK will take him because they actually they didn't take a guy, but they got a hotel for a guy last time.
Yeah, I'll do that.
CK might get you a hotel.
And now we see how they wound up with getting him the hotel. But did you notice that when they said, well, if you don't mind her taking your van, and he didn't offer up, it's her van.
Correct. Absolutely. There's some little things that are going on there. Again, it gets us back to why we have to gather some information at the beginning. I will say that, you know, the fact that these officers were able to come up with a hotel room for one of these parties, I mean, that's just good police work there. That's showing, you know, a lot of concern to do what they can for that. So the fact that they're able to do that, that's, you know, that we should be doing more of that. We should have resources that make it easy where we know that, hey, here we are in this situation. Let's go ahead and enact this plan where we can get one of these people some type of housing. So credit to them.
All right. Well, this is a good spot to break. So hopefully you guys enjoyed what we showed so far today. There is a subscribe button and a like button. I think by now you guys know what to do. If you'd like to see more of Cop versus Lawyer, the Jury Box. Dan, anything you want to add? Any final comments before we sign off for today?
No, good discussion, Jay. And I look forward to some more discussions, especially we're going to go down the road of whether his attorney's doing something right and dig more into how these cops are. So I look forward to talking with you more.
Very good. This is Cop versus Lawyer, the Jury Box, and we'll see you next time.